Welcome to the Predictive World series brought to you by SalesChoice, which specializes in ending revenue uncertainty for human advantage. I'm your host, Jen Yim. I'm the Director of Product and Marketing at SalesChoice, and we bring three offerings to market. First, there's Sales Insights, which helps sales professionals meet their sales plans with guided insights. Then there's Mood Insights, which helps frontline employees' voices be heard, all powered by AI. And our third offering is AI and Data Science as a Service, which designs and builds and maintains AI models with a new line of business on generative AI. Over the years, we've been hosting numerous experts and thought leaders in AI and revenue growth, building a trove of podcasts, webinars, white papers, and more. And I invite our listeners to go to saleschoice.com/resources to be able to access. It's a many years worth of trove, so there's tons of valuable information there. Today, I have with us Rehan, CEO at Securiti AI. Welcome and pleasure to meet you. Rehan, can you tell us a bit about your background?
First of all, thank you so much for hosting me here, Jen. Thank you, Cindy. My name is Rehan Jalil. I'm the CEO for a company, Securiti AI. I'm based here in Silicon Valley. The company is about over 5 years old. And previously, myself and the team here, we were running the cloud security business at Symantec. I started my career as an engineer, very much focused on products. And at that time, started building at Sun Microsystems, building GPUs. And now we are back into the same data and AI world. But pleasure to be here. Thank you for hosting.
Wow, those are some amazing marquee brands that you've had your fingers in. That's an incredible backstory. Could you also tell us a bit about Securiti AI?
Yeah, absolutely. I think as the core mission of the company is primarily to enable the safe use of data with AI. For instance, in the enterprise, or frankly, any use case of AI, without data, you really cannot create value. No question, the new generative models and new models that are coming out, they are super impressive, but they are useful in the enterprise construct if they can work with your data, but not just carte blanche use of data, but use in a safe fashion. And the mission of this company and our entire team, and speaking on their behalf, the technology is to enable organizations to use the data in a safe fashion, in a secure fashion, which has privacy compliant, which has security taken into account, the governance is there. That's what we provide as one thing that we call data command center. That's what the company does.
Very cool. I'm going to kick it off to Dr. Cindy Gordon from SalesChoice to start the conversation.
Thanks, Jen, and Rehan, welcome. I'm so excited that you're here with us today, and there's so many thoughts that I have, and just kudos that you are recognizing the need for that command data control center. I can't tell you how many companies we go in and the data lineage practices, and that with the audits coming on stream, the implications that people are going to have from their readiness. So the fact that you've wrapped a secure operating model around your value prop is just very, very wise. And I think 2025 is going to be a huge growth year because everybody's now looking ahead at some of the new legislation, right? That eventually the US will get something formally in place next year. But I think in the EU, they're really putting the pressure points on the rest of North America to move. So, Rehan, what are you seeing? You've already kind of mentioned the backstory of how you started the company. And obviously, you've got a lot of value propositions. But as you go across your portfolio, where are you seeing the most pain in organizations? And are you mainly selling to enterprise accounts or mid? I suspect it's not small business, but just would love to hear where you're seeing if there's some resonance there that our learners and viewers could learn from.
Yeah, absolutely. I think so. The core mission, when we started this thing, was a realization that no question, data is a lifeblood. On the back end, everything kind of operates on it. For any organization, whether it's a financial organization, it's a bank account. Your bank account really means your money really means data at this point, right? It's literally everything is data. Your hospital really means everything on the back end is actually just data. So needless to say, like all organizations are like that, but the obligations around data, it is not single dimensional. It is not that you can actually have just secure the data, you're fine. Their obligations around data are from security lens, you have to know it, you have to manage it the right way, you have to make sure their privacy is taken into account, you have to make sure that your compliance is actually happening. When we started the organization, the team actually had the realization that a platform is needed, which we can call your command center for your data, which can actually provide you a single source of truth around what data do you really have? Is it safe? Whether it's structured, unstructured, semi-structured, streaming data, whether all the privacy obligations that you have on this organization, can you fulfill it in an easier fashion? Are you governing the way that you can be compliant or not violating your own contracts with your own customers if you're B2B customers that you have? And that realization actually was the reason that we started building a unified platform. We eventually gave the name of a data command center. And on top of it, we started building use cases. So we started with the privacy blade first, then the security, and then the governance. Now it's all about generative AI. Fast forward today, the biggest use cases or biggest thing that we're seeing is what people had never paid that much attention to before. If you look at the data, traditionally it has been structured data used for BI and analytics. And it has a lot of huge value for your business processes. When you bring a new construct like a language model into the mix, which can understand natural language or any language in a natural form, including computer languages and images, then the whole conversation we're seeing today is shifted to unstructured data. And the unstructured data is literally the epicenter of activity right now, because people want to utilize it with the large language models in a fashion that it's not toxic. Because you bring this very powerful brain into your organization and drop into your enterprise environment with the data, it would be extremely toxic and explosive, right? Because you can break all kinds of controls, entitlement controls, your privacy controls, your security, your lineage, you don't know where the files are going. Your regulations can fall apart. And that's what we're seeing, that people have a huge appetite and desire to even use simplest of the co-pilots. They want to understand what is it doing? Is going to basically break things apart or not? As an example, I'll give you recently another CIO was talking to, they turned on the co-pilot on SharePoint, turned it off the next day. And it was only for executives, just to try it. And what they realized is that people could see each other's information, the Copilot was generating answers from each other's information, which was not getting exposed before. The problem existed, but now it's getting exposed, right? That's what we're seeing, how to go from cute projects, which are POCs, to full production, which requires full controls on the data.
Yeah. So Rehan, are you seeing that there's industry variance right now? Like, when I think about the financial services market, they'd be very mature in understanding the specific value proposition that you have. The healthcare market that's highly regulated. Are you seeing any patterns, across by industries yet, or are you, as you're seeing that the verticals are they're all emerging, and if you go to big players, they're all kind of wrestling with some of the same issues. But any thoughts there? Industry?
It's a very good question, actually, Cindy. So within our market, we have a portfolio of products. So we create a unified layer of intelligence around data, what we call data command graph. Over it, we build different blades. There are certain capabilities within the platform which focused on, I would say, more regular. I mean, it can tell you if you're compliant to the regulations and things like that. There's certain aspects which everyone needs, and I'll make a distinction. If you have entitlement, regardless of which company it is, you do not want people seeing each other's information because it's segregated. You do not want companies' somebody's salaries to be seen by any other employees. As simple thing as that. It has nothing to do with the type of industry. There's certain type of controls that everyone wants. Security controls on data, entitlement, and things like that, right?
Sure.
There is very horizontal kind of a use cases. Then if you go to very specialized industry, where you have regulators paying attention, you have higher bar So there are additional capabilities in the platform to, give you comfort whether you're compliant to these things or not. There, of course, the value proposition, you add on to a few more things on top of it, but it's a very, very broad. Anywhere there is data, anywhere there's, baselines, controls are needed, particularly as you bring generative AI into the mix, is become actually one of the hot topics, particularly about unstructured data.
Yeah. So, but back to the industries, is there, if you look across your sales portfolio, are there any, if you look at the distribution out of the revenue, what industry, is it all variable, or is there any trends that are higher? Financial services, a higher, client base. Just trying to get a sense of the of what you're seeing in the industry side.
So I'll talk about this company and I'll talk about trends in general. So for us, we have some of the biggest banks, US banks as customers, largest insurance companies, biggest airlines, technology companies, silicon companies, consumer companies, e-commerce. But as a company, we focused on the high end of the enterprise. So, but we're seeing across the verticals, the customer base that exists inside for this company, right? In general, what we're seeing, the appetite to use AI is also across the board, right? We're seeing, because it's something that the board level, the exec level, they all can relate to it, because everyone has played with, what the power of, generative AI with the ChatGPT, and so they're taking that imagination and bringing it to say, what can we do with it? So no question, the appetite exists, but how do you penetrate? How much broad adoption you can have? Certain companies have much more methodical approach because they deal with regulations. They actually make sure their reputation is online. Let's say if you're one of the known consumer companies, you have a chatbot sitting on your website, and it starts cursing, as an example. You're going to be in Wall Street Journal in no time, right? So I think that's why whether you're regulation or not regulation, people are paying attention to how to safely use it. And they need tooling, they need infrastructure, they need reporting, they need assurances. And of course, they're going after all kinds of these tooling around it to make sure that they can make it happen. But there's no question, there's a mad rush across
I think
industries.
The other piece of the puzzle, is the board of directors, liability, director liability insurance and company liability insurance, where they will start to, as they mature in knowledge, right? You could see, that they're going to give you a higher, a better rate if they know that you've got a product like your product installed, especially if they're building LLMs. And so I see there's so much opportunity to sort of bring pieces of the puzzle together, right? Where, obviously you press on one side and people start to move, but it's great to hear, and not surprised that you're seeing things across the industry. And I hope also they're putting in the right talent as well, that are ethicists, that are really experienced in, the design of these models. The research we just finished, we've been working on a series with Ernst & Young and the Bedford Group, just to share a little snippet here before I go to the next question. And the research is showing on a global basis there's lots of investment in infrastructure and toolkits and methods, talent, but the return on investments, it's like we're still building, if you want to call it, the utility highways, and you know what I mean? Like, you need the security, you need the foundations, but in terms of building out really sustaining operating models, we're not there yet, right? I think the global average right now on return on investments, it's not 30, I think it was around 15% with the last research that I read, so it's going to be really interesting to have this conversation 3, 4, 5 years from now, because it'll be a little different. People will have the bolts in place. You'll have a much more, mind as well, share of the capabilities. But it really is, to me, getting to the sustaining attributions, and we're really still very much in the early stages. It's hard to, AI has been here for a long time, but we're at this point, we're still building some of the basics, right? And security is so key, right? Next question, I'm curious about, with the speed that you're seeing in the market, Rehan, and also to, I'm just wondering what your vision statement is in terms of bringing this all to life. There's probably a phrase or a sentence that you use just as your rallying cry, And it's probably real simple, but I'd love just to hear it.
Yeah, it's very simple. I think it's all about enabling safe use of data plus AI.
Yeah, and that's
So
clear.
because there is a huge uh, benefit to be derived out of if we combine the data and the new models. The value is unquestionably there. There's no question about it. How do it safely? If we can enable that, if we can put all the safety around that's needed, you're literally enabling to go build these things in a fashion that people want to utilize. Because if you don't do that, the downside is very significant, right? Because the data could be gone, hackers could be in. Because let's say if it's a chatbot, that representation of chatbot is actually, if it's an enterprise, is coming to your data. Answer are going to come out of your data. It's not some public data. And so it means make sure, and this has become a new conduit of attack going into your data. How do you monitor, these new AI agents? What are they being prompted to do? Who's prompting it? Is it, attempt to what people call, jailbreaking going on, or some prompt injection is going on it? So there's a new set of capabilities that are needed, just starting with generative AI use cases, but it also is elevating the requirement of having better sanity, like inside the organizations around unstructured data, because it's going to be used in a much more automated fashion. That's what we are.
Yeah. So is it only generative AI apps or that you're focused on right now at this time, Rehan, in large language model enablement and sort of that whole value chain is generative AI specific, or are you going into, other forms of AI as well?
I think where we're seeing the most appetite is actually generative AI. So data can be combined with AI in any form, like structured data in the AI. But where we're seeing the most new activity is actually on the generative AI side of things right now with unstructured data.
Yeah.
No question, AI has existed for a long time, but frankly, the real magic is that when your LLM starts understanding your language and they start generating content that we can relate to, that's where we're seeing the most activity.
And just building on what you're sharing, your point about the board, and C-levels often have had more exposure, especially, since OpenAI's opened up some of their access points. And we also have a whole series of other toolkits, right? From the Copilot with Microsoft, Mistral from France, depending if you're into the Google world, etc. And I think when they rename it again, it was Gemini, but I think it's called something else again. Everybody keeps changing their branding names. So you're getting that knowledge. So the curiosity, the thoughts, the innovation, and they want to experiment, right? And just your value, you bring a very clear value proposition. And I love the term of the, sort of the data central control center, because it really is the new strategic asset. And we've been saying, I'm sure you have been saying that for a long time, but finally people are recognizing if they don't have that moat on that boat very structured, they're not going to be able to sail very well, right? So I think the other piece here is, what do you think the barriers are right now? Because obviously there's appetite, there's growth. What do you think the barriers are, particularly for the small businesses? Because they're not as equipped to necessarily handle, but they're busy building things, right, and selling things. How are you tackling that side, or that's going to be, are you trying to open up your platform in ways that small businesses can leverage that capability at a cost structure that can allow them to build apps, and so you kind of bring that stream up too, or any thoughts on that side of the fence, Rehan?
Yeah, I think if you think about we as consumers actually have adopted the use of generative AI much faster. I mean, ask any of the children literally, and they are on GPT, right? They're on ChatGPT all the time. So as consumers, we've kind of raced forward. It's very easy. It's easy user interface. We already used to conversing in natural language. It's like fits right in. There's no friction at all. We used to basically asking things and relying on questions answers. And it's amazing, actually, how fast that adoption on the consumer side is. But when you bring in that model into your data, there's a lot of education and awareness needed. How do you do that in an easy fashion? So you were asking what is the impediments? Actually, is the comfort level first to education, because people have to utilize it. First layer of adoption we've seen is that people trying to turn on copilots inside their SaaS applications. That's because it's easy. You turn it on, but they're realizing you can turn it on, it can create havoc sometimes. So make sure you've configured things right on the back end of where your data is sitting on the data, and also you've done your assessment of your SaaS vendors right, that they are not taking your data and carte blanche sending it to some large language model where it's getting accessible to some others because it's training on it. We saw that as a first wave of let me quickly turn it on and see what happens. But now we're seeing people are now govern it properly, govern particularly the data and the configuration of systems properly. And we have a big role to play in there. But where we're seeing the big wave, the massive wave behind is for the large enterprises, which have massive amount of proprietary data, which models have never been trained on. And models are acting like a language expert. And then you bring that language expert into the mix, and now it's your proprietary data. You tune it, you maybe sometimes train it, but most times you just tune it and use it, or sometimes just use it, right, as is. The model. And it requires a bit of I would say, learning. But the biggest impediment often organizations actually have is one or two POCs and projects doing that way is okay. If I have dozens and hundreds, how will I actually operationalize it? How will I monitor it? How will I keep it secure? How will I make sure data is not going? Because data is like river. It changes every moment, right? Data is changing.
Yeah, for sure. Are you building in the data governance structure in your operating model then to be able to track, like in the machine learning ops side, the life cycles of like how many models are at this stage or this stage, at this stage, at this stage? So if you think about that life cycle, in Gen AI, that you can actually have the clarity of where you are, whether it's a quick fix or it's a high value app or a high risk app, because that's an important point in the governance and data lineage structures, right?
Yeah, I think the journey typically starts with often organizations don't fully even understand. Developers are going and starting to use the AI models. So there is an extent of shadow AI that actually is going on in the enterprise, right? Because developers are they are very comfortable with these things. They can just bring it to the environment, start playing with the data. So there is a whole construct to keep an eye and make sure what is going on, like what models are being utilized, and provide the guidance to the developers inside the organization to say, like, what is safe? How do you find it safe? The rating cards is a construct. You provide the rating cards so we do provide those rating cards. And then the journey starts from finding what data is going into these models, knowing visibility. If you don't know it, there's no way to control it. So know what data is actually going into models for inferencing, tuning, and training, right? So there is some tech we provide on that side. Then if you do build a system and you start offering it to your consumers or your internal employees, what interaction is going on with the model and the systems, and monitoring and then controlling it to make sure there is no actually exfiltration of data going on. There is no cyber attacks coming through this open window. And that's the role in general, what we're seeing, the companies want to be put in place before they say, I can have 150 other, AI projects that can be active inside the organization.
Yeah, in many ways, you're creating a mirror or a glass data world where you can see everything clearly, right? In terms of generative AI development and within a security infrastructure, and trying to grab the whole world is saying, hey, like we've got some huge issues just in this domain to get right, and and to really to learn from that. Very helpful. So Rehan, you've been successful and you've been a CEO in other roles as well. This is obviously another exciting, growth trajectory, not only for you, but also for your leaders and your employees. What key lessons have you learned as a CEO in your journey, and if you had to sort of summarize them in, 2 or 3 key lessons, what would they be? Especially because our audience are really interested in learning about AI leadership and what's different from traditional software development as well. And I know you know the answers, but so many people don't know the differences between, traditional software development and building AI structures.
Yeah, I think first of all, there's no choice, right? So it's not that you can live without it. So the world has already changed, whether we realize it or not, as leaders, right? And then in that new era, if we're not embracing that, how to best utilize to create value for your customers with it, because that's all we are. Every company has a reason to exist if they're not creating value. And if AI helps, generative AI or any kind of AI helps to actually create value for your customers at a different rate, at a different bar, at a different quality, at a different scale. If you don't do it, somebody else is going to do it, right? At the end, just that's what it is. In every domain, people are trying to create more and more value for their respective, customers. Somebody's going to be there, and if you want to be among the top players, then it better be you. That's number one, which means it's all about getting the comfort, getting the education, and generally mapping that what you offer in that contract, what can you actually offer to your customers better. I think this is a core part of it, but at the same time, don't try to force fit it, because sometimes it could be just don't do it for a cool factor, right? This is just very cool to actually offer some kind of a co-pilot, but there's no additional value, or maybe no additional revenue that's going to come through it. It's just additional cost that's going to come through it. So I think that's a balance that you actually have to strike, and it's only possible if you dive in. That nuance you will understand only if you dive in. From a distance is very, very difficult to say like what would do or not. The second is that it's at the end, it's about teams actually understanding of these things. Any company is the core thing is about the entire team. So it's about entire organization's comfort level, which is all about your culture, how fast people feel like they should be embracing it, and taking their views into the account, because it's always great to actually hear from your core team to like what's the best way to use it and what things not to use it for. And then it's execution at the end of the day. When you line it and you just have to execute. But if you've created a culture and people are willing to learn new things, in fact, they take pride in it to learn new things, and also you have open culture in which you can talk through it to say what to do and what not to do, then I think those companies would be in a good path.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned the point on the execution, right? I was recently talking to a fairly large financial services EVP of AI and data sciences, and she had shared that out of all of the models that they were developing, I think only 20% were moving to production, which is echoing the execution point. And, so, to your point, choose wisely which use case you're going to tackle, right? And, have some dimensionality and when you think about the volume of unstructured data that are in these enterprises, it's so they actually now, can actually start creating these, generative AI apps, build out even more asset value. So I think we're going to start to see a lot of creativity because at the end of the day, how many HR policy documents do you need, across a particular industry, right? Or with the particular documentation that you have for, who's responsible or accountable. And you think about just being able to ask the universe and find what you need. And so I think it's really going to start changing the operational, matter within an enterprise. Any company, as long as they start to your point, you got to get in there. You got to get your hands dirty. You got to try. You got to experiment, because that's how you learn, right? And to listen, very acute listening to all the voices, because everybody's learning at different trajectories.
Yeah.
So exciting. Now, I would be remiss because I do wear an ethicist hat from time to time. Do teach AI ethics and law too, and write for Forbes, and got another new book coming out on which will have an ethical domain. But and I don't know if you've read Dr. Nick Borstrom's new book on utopia. If not, you got to get it. He's always an interesting character. But what are your thoughts in terms of, because your whole platform is going to be, you look at the different laws that are coming in, right? Right. And how do you see handling that on the different regulatory environments? Are you going to try and identify those in your operating governance? So saying, okay, if you're doing a generative AI model in New York, these might be some different attributes, or in California, or if the EU, but where are you in that thinking? Because this is coming into an area that's just going to be fraught with issues on verification, validation before I go into production, right?
Absolutely. I think in general, at this societal level, I think there's huge implications, because these models actually are, they have insane amount of compressed information, and they learn all the time, and they don't die like humans. They will live forever, and they grow. They're just exponentially growing, and they can talk to each other through software. So, this is insanely powerful things that are going to continue to kind of improve rapidly. It has implications, right? Just because you find the recipe of your method of building a nuclear technology, you don't start using it. There's rules around it, right? And there is physical objects, so you can create more bounded rules around it. Who does what with it? But this is software, so it's actually infinitely more complex than putting guardrails around something which is physical hardware, right? So, which means that the governments and the regulators have a huge role to play. Just because you have a fast car that can drive 300 miles an hour, you don't drive it. You still drive it within the speed limit, right? And this needs to happen, unquestionably. And I hope it happens, because it's no question that there is goodness here. There's insane amount of goodness that can be created to raise the bar of services, the scale at which we can go to places where humanly not possible to actually operate those kind of services. So there's goodness here, but at the same time, there's a lot of things that, regulations are the way. There is no other easy way, and even they not be able to control it, right? So not everyone's going to follow the regulations, right? Like maybe one country will do, another country doesn't. So it's not so simple that you define a law and it gets implemented, enforced. That's why there's a law and there is a police. So how you enforce it is another kind of a ball game on top of it. Having said that, the work that's going on, what we've seen is GDPR came out almost 20 years after .com. Digital era came, it was late 1990s, and GDPR is 2018. That's not the same for AI regulations. They're coming faster. They're sitting on the shoulders of data regulations, but they're faster because people are realizing the implications are, much more different if you don't actually have this thing in place. Having said that, companies need the tooling that can help them decipher what is it that they need to do, what is right and wrong, because they may have the right intent, but they don't have the right knowledge or the right technology to do it for them. And that's our role as an organization also, to simplify it, map it in an automated fashion, and help highlight where the things you need to be doing and you're not doing, and maybe in certain cases even automate that to actually do those things. That's part of our role as a data command center company.
Yeah. So are you finding that the brands like IBM, Accenture, Deloitte, PwC are really driving channel enablement for you, Rehan? Or do you find that you're still getting, a lot of the success just going direct, and, because, sometimes even the consulting organizations, they're not as far along in knowing what to do as you are. So.
Yeah, I think some of them actually have really good thought leadership, but so that's why they're on the side of customers trust them, and that's huge. Customers rely on them. That actually is huge. And many of them, the names that you gave, they don't resell your product, but they also need basically partners that can provide the tech stack. So when they have whichever customer trusts them, they can actually tell them, what is the right architecture to do it. That's the form.
Yeah.
We work with some of these names as very close partners
Sure.
for us.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. I am a former Accenture partner, so I can certainly relate as well in the sense of the trust, especially when you're still an emerging organization on many levels. What's the single takeaway key message you think for leaders using AI to help elevate their success? You've said a lot of things, but if we had one sentence to leave them with to ponder, what might that be?
Maybe I didn't fully understand the question, Cindy.
One sentence. Yeah, no worries. If you have one sentence for our listeners to ponder as they look at AI to help elevate their success, what would be your main message to them to really get right?
Key message should be laser focused on utilizing the AI to create the value for the customer, take out all the other things away, and the focus on that, have that vision, and then execute, but do it in an ethical fashion.
Yeah, good message. Focus where it counts, right? In your revenue generating and profitable vision for the organization. And so your recommendation would be, yes, you can think about all kinds of generative AI applications, but the customer value chain is a really good place. More risk sometimes, but more reward. You're also helping a customer learn too, is another way of looking at it, right? In partnership.
Absolutely, but don't underestimate the downside, which means you put all the right controls in place so that while utilizing it, there are no downsides because you forgot to put all the rails around this insanely powerful thing that's come into your enterprise on your data.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Well, thank you so much, Rehan. I've got so many other questions, but I know we're out of time. I'll pass it back to Jen and just thank you so much for joining us today on our AI Predictive World series.
Yeah, thanks, Rehan. It was a pleasure to chat about AI together. And thanks to our listeners for joining us for the Predictive World series by SalesChoice. And I, again, invite everyone to go to saleschoice.com/resources, where we have a trove of AI and thought leadership content. Join us next time for more insights on the AI world.